Finding your way through the fog. Recently, I heard someone who claimed to have contact with the other side. He said that those in the afterlife usually found it difficult to visit this realm because it was like entering a thick fog of negative emotion and irrationality. Whether this person actually had contact with the other side, who knows? But I do know that for me, this realm often feels like a thick fog obscures it. Some say we are adversely affected by the fog of electromagnetic noise emanating from cell phones, Wi-Fi, etc. Recently, there was a brief blackout where I live, and I felt a wonderful quieting that was more than a diminishing of acoustical noise. But I don't know. I don't feel like I'm adversely affected, and I'm surrounded by things emitting signals in my study here. I find the fog, but I do find myself distracted by psychic noise, like if there are people in the house doing different things, that affects my consciousness. So it's the proximity of people more than Wi-Fi signals influences me. I find the fog of psychic noise more oppressive, and for this reason, living in large cities is difficult for me, even though I grew up in the Bronx. I like to get up in the pre-dawn hours to write when there is less psychic noise of waking personalities in the surrounding community and the household. There are places and times when the fog is lessened, and we need to make good use of such zones of clarity. Much of the time, the thick and heavy fog of what I call the Babylon Matrix, see the glossary of Zap terms on the website, it's on the homepage, whatever its source, feels inescapable. This is one of the givens of human incarnation. To find our way through the fog, we need strategies to deal with it. Using myself as example, the fog is often created by internal perturbations, fluctuations in my brain chemistry, and the ever-changing weather systems of mood. What I eat has much to do with the thickness of the fog. If I eat heavy, highly processed food, dairy, etc., which I rarely do nowadays, then I'm going to feel foggier. If I eat smaller portions of high-quality food, as compared to food-like substances, I feel sharper. Similarly, vigorous exercise makes me much sharper. I avoid living in places where the fog is thicker, and I use the times of the day when there is more clarity to do my highest value work. There are two basic strategies implied here: going to places where the fog is not so thick, and maintaining practices to make yourself sharper so that you can be alert even in a foggy realm. Some of the thickest fogs are generated by the presence of unconscious people in our environment. This fog is often explicit and tangible. For example, if you are a captive audience riding in a vehicle with other people and who have nothing to say but are saying it as loudly and volubly as possible, I can't tune that out. Some people maybe can, I can't. But I always have noise-canceling headphones with me to at least give me something. AirPods, in other words. So that I'm not the victim of just incoming sounds wherever I happen to be traveling. You walk into a store and maybe they are playing. Fortunately, this is done less than it used to be, but where they're just playing a commercial radio station with commercials in the background. This is a direct interference with your interior processing, unless you are, unlike me, especially gifted at tuning it out. Fog emanates from the sound of a television in the background, from the info overload of the present era with text messages, emails, phone calls, advertisements, and overheard chatter, all streaming in at once. The average home has 500,000 objects in it these days, and many of those objects have computer chips in them and are subject to distracting and maddening glitches. Other times, the foggy interference is subtle, more of a vague, pervasive miasma. I often feel that the fog seems to creep up on me, and I'll feel lethargic, unfocused, fungal-like fuzziness encroaching, slowing me down, sapping the very resources I need to clear through it. As I've gotten older, I've actually become better at burning through such fogs by relentlessly focusing on my mission objectives. And you could see the card stoking the fire, which is linked in the body of this card. To find my way through such a fog, I ask myself, what is the best use of my time right now? If something of high value is available, something I will remember well on my deathbed, then I engage it. Usually this is a creative task, a quality human interaction, or an enriching cultural experience. In other cases, the best way to deal with the fog is to summon will and focus to work through some of the obscuring clutter of unfinished tasks and disorganized objects. So in other words, the best way through the fog is not to let it paralyze you, but to keep working on your mission objectives. Cleaning up my living space is a good use of such time. It doesn't take much mental clarity, and a messy living or working space is a huge fog source. Sometimes meditation, not doing, is the best choice, as it can increase awareness of the fog of distracting thoughts and inner preoccupations. To be honest, though, I'm not much of a meditator. Intense cardio exercise will almost always cut through fog for me. Spending time in nature can also be an antidote to man-made fog as you immerse yourself in a noise and clutter-free zone. This card was originally inspired by an email I received from Brant, who was a young friend, well, much younger when I got the email, with a strong commitment to consciousness. He wrote, I am back in Olympia, readjusting to this city after some travel, and I feel like the year away has given me the ability to sort of find a bit more of who I am or want to be. So the city with all its influences and who I could or should be seems less daunting, and I feel much less anxious when I don't line up with the images, currents around me. In other words, by taking a year off from college, Brant has a stronger sense of who he is as he has progressed on the path of individuation, and therefore the prevailing zeitgeist around him cannot dominate him, cannot fully fog his inner clarity and sense of who he is. So this is why, even though I'm ever older, and therefore, one might expect more fog, from neurological deterioration or something. Actually, the reverse is true. Now, of course, I'm not profoundly old yet. The reverse is true because my will and determination have only gotten stronger with age, so the active energy that would burn through fog is much stronger, and therefore I feel less effect of fog than I did at earlier parts of my life. Although Brant is finding his way through the fog, there are many lost souls, those who immerse themselves in thickening fogs. Some intentionally fog out with bong hits or beer. Some people are so accustomed to living in fog that they're as unaware of it as fish are of being wet. Fog has become their default state, and they become comfortably or uncomfortably numb. Many are in medicated or self-medicated fogs, are eclipsed by the fog of subclinical depression, which has become almost the norm in our society. In the midst of thick fog, we may become apathetic and indulgent, slouching into our various addictions. When I was younger, I would sometimes stop and I'm talking about as a child, I would stop in the midst of fog and blame myself for it and look back regretfully. Looking back in a fog, one becomes paralyzed. Do not do life evaluation or evaluation of major relationships when in a fog, as your vision is limited. And so this is something you've heard me, if you've heard other cards, harp on before, but it's such an important principle. Not to do life evaluation on the fly. If you're going to evaluate your life for a major relationship, when I'm going to do that, then I have to be in a cognitively strong state, and I would be in front of the computer screen and typing the whole time. It's going to be an active writing session where I'm really probing into it and I'm structuring my thoughts more. Even though I'm somebody who has pretty well structured thoughts, even without writing, I will write them down to give them more structure and clarity. Okay, but if I'm in a foggy place, that is definitely not the time to try and get the long view of your life or relationships. So instead of doing that, look at what is immediately before you and directly up ahead. We need to be aware that we are in a fog to be able to sharpen ourselves to deal with it. You can have clarity that you're in a fog, even though that sounds paradoxical. It is crucial that when we recognize we are in a fog, we do not thicken it by wasting energy on self-criticism. To find your way through a fog, summon inner fire and work at anything that needs doing and is directly before you.